You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and now it's time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show for 2024, the very first edition in January. Well, today's edition is slightly different from previous shows. It's just me and my Todd, but I'm actually joined this time by Ben Emlyn-Jones, our regular guest. He actually paid a visit to me here in Dorset, so we did an interview in my summer house. So enjoy the show.
Hello there. Good evening. It is New Year's Day 2024. Happy New Year, Neil.
Happy New Year, Ben.
I'm Ben Emlyn-Jones. I'm here with Neil Ward.
Yes, thank you for coming down to Weymouth in Dorset, Ben. So you arrived on New Year's Eve, and this morning we went out to the island of Portland. The weather's now overcast. It's a little bit rainy here. It's starting to get dark, but we've set up a small studio here in the summer house. I know it's winter, but that's what it's called, summer house. So we're going to do a small interview here and just talk about things, paranormal subjects, social subjects, anything that comes to mind, really. So Ben, you've been to Portland before, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I came in July, and it's last year now, and we had a lovely time. And I'll put a link in the description box of the video to on my copy to our previous adventure. And it was that's why I spoke at the Dorset Earth Mysteries group, and we went in a nice warm weather. We went up to the top of the Portland Peninsula, and it was very nice. The weather wasn't so good, but we still had a good time. We saw a farm full of wallabies, and
very unexpected.
Yes, and It wasn't very Antipodean weather, I must say. You don't want to barbie down the beach, mate, today. But we did go to Portland Bill, the famous lighthouse, and I overcome my fear of heights, and I gritted my teeth, and I didn't chicken out this time. So regular viewers will be proud of me, because they know that when I went to the South Shields Lighthouse, I did, and I'm very ashamed of myself for chickening out. So. But it was really, really cool. It was a really good time. We also went looking for the Bibby Stockholm barge, which is a bit sort of, not famous so much as infamous. Bibby Stockholm, of course, is a... Oh, did someone switch off there?
Went dark.
Was that a ghost?
Oh,
it's that, right.
Not being
yeah.
There it goes again. I think it's because it's the battery connector. We're leaning right.
Oh, okay.
There you go. That's what it does.
Okay, all right. Okay. The Bibby Stockholm is a barge. Well, it's called a barge. It's actually just like a pontoon with a couple of buildings on top of it, really. I mean, it doesn't have an engine or it doesn't have any propulsion system or steering. It's literally just that. It's like a floating
accommodation.
Yeah.
It was initially designed for the oil industry, for people working on platforms and things. And it was designed for workers in the oil rig industry to have somewhere to stay when they're presumably off shift or something.
Yeah. It's been adapted for use for the government to house illegal migrants. They call them migrants in waiting, or what I call migrants having their claims processed. They have various euphemisms for them. But they are. It's been used to accommodate 500 of them, which is a bit silly, really, because when you consider how many of particular migrants there are, a barge full of 500 people is just a drop in the ocean. It's nothing. It's the equivalent of the number of people probably arrive in the country every day claiming asylum. And so I think what I suspect is it's some kind of publicity stunt. And it is, it's already been closed once because they found legion. They found Legionarium in the water supply, which is can cause a deadly disease. You have to test water for it. I think they've got about 30 people on there now. They're hoping to fill it up to 500 eventually.
Yeah.
But what do you think it is? Because it's had a lot of publicity, which I don't think is really justified.
Ironically, although it's had a lot of publicity and everyone seems to know about it, it's very difficult to get to because it's sort of tucked around the harbour of Portland. And when you drive so far down the road where it's indicated to be, but then you hit a security barrier and you can't go further than that. So any kind of reports that I've seen must have gone through the security barrier. They must have permission to film there, which obviously haven't, so we couldn't get there.
But we thought we might be able to get a shot from it from a long distance. But unbelievably, nowhere on the Portland Peninsula, even though it includes things such as very high cliffs and things like that, and then the hills that look down onto the town itself and the Portland port itself, there's nowhere where you actually have a line of sight towards the Bibby Stockholm barge, which is really strange because it's almost like they deliberately moored it in a location where it cannot be seen from anywhere, except, as I say, from inside the security cordon at Portland Port.
Yeah.
I don't know why they think what that is. Do they think we're going to hit it with a...
I think it's more of a security protection.
Yeah.
It's seen as a strategic place to put it, and it keeps protesters away or whoever disagrees with it away from there. And whereas in all these other places, there's been hotels that they've got security guards outside hotels where they've got all these immigrants, migrants, whatever you want to call them. And so this is, I think, it's the first time they've actually put these people on a floating platform. And I think the idea is they want to try a few of them up and down the country in various ports. But this is probably the first one, and they sort of literally testing the water with it.
Yeah. It has attracted protesters who've been protesting against the government policy. And interestingly, the protesters actually are also, they're not just protesting against the government, they're protesting against each other, because there are two main camps. One camp is saying that the government should immediately be repatriating all these people to wherever they came from. The other side is saying that they should be allowed off the barge, have their claims processed immediately, and be allowed to wander free in the population. So obviously there's two opposing interests at work here.
And also the other thing that's been in the news recently, only in the last sort of month of December, which we've just left now, we're in January the 1st here, it was a time of recording, is that there was one guy from the Bibby Stockholm, I think it was a 27-year-old guy, he committed suicide. I think there's an inquest got to be held into, but it looks like he probably hung himself, I think.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So I don't know whether he's being threatened to be sent home or sent on to somewhere else. I don't know the ins and outs of that, unfortunately. But he obviously found it too stressful. Sad for him, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not. I'm on this. Obviously, I'm on the side of the people who say that these people shouldn't be here, should be repatriated. Yet, I feel no satisfaction hearing that someone ended their life on board that ship at all, on board that barge at all, say ship. I think that's a great tragedy.
Yeah,
definitely. So condolences to his loved ones if they're watching.
Yeah. Now, obviously, this is in the history of this, it's very, very young in the sense of what it is as a building. But how long they plan to have it for, I don't know. But whilst we was at the lighthouse, the Portland Bill Lighthouse, I was very interested to find out that the guide that took us around happened to mention the fact that people seeing things of a spooky nature there, ghosts or felt presences, haven't they?
Yes. It's a lighthouse that was built in 1905, and there's an older lighthouse further along the coast, just a few hundred yards further up the coast. It's no longer in use. And the lady who, she was an interesting lady. She had a strange accent, which I couldn't identify at first. I thought I heard that somewhere before. And there is a newsreader called Lee's Duchet who also has it. It's actually Eastern Canadian, from the area around New Brunswick. But she was a nice lady, and she was very supportive of me because I was suffering from terrible vertigo. She sort of noticed immediately and was very supportive of me. But I'm pleased to say that I gritted my teeth and I didn't chicken out this time. And regular viewers will be proud of me because they know I did do that at the South Shield Lighthouse. I felt a bit embarrassed about that.
So is this the first time
I buried those ghosts. Yeah, sure. To coin a phrase. Yeah, it's the first time I've actually been up a lighthouse, and very interesting it was too to see. There's a modern light now, and they used old-fashioned lights. They used to have oil lamps, and now they have powerful electric lamps. And they now have LEDs. They used to have incandescent filaments, and now they have LEDs. But like all old buildings, there's a lot of them do attract spirits of various kinds. Lighthouses have a spooky reputation. probably because they're very often in remote areas. Indeed, there's a film called The Lighthouse, which I've not actually seen, but I've seen a few clips of it. It looks like some kind of supernatural psychological thriller set on a remote island lighthouse sometime in the 19th century, where you sometimes get 2, 3, sometimes 4 men who would be literally isolated from the entire world for sometimes several months at a time, maintaining the lighthouse. This was a day before there was any form of communication, electronic communication. So you literally wouldn't know what was going on. You might as well be on a desert island.
You're telling me about a story about a lighthouse in Scotland where it was abandoned and people just found they couldn't understand where they'd gone.
This is very strange. Yes, this is the Flannan Island mystery. And indeed, there's a very good bedtime story video made about this. This took place, I believe, in the Flannan Islands mystery is it's something that happened in 1900. The Flannan Islands are a remote archipelago off the coast of western Scotland, and there was the usual thing. There was a lighthouse there manned with 3 lighthouse keepers, whose job was to stay there for probably for several months at a time, just maintaining that light. This was in the days before there were any form of electronic communication. This, well, not just in terms of themselves, calling your phoning home and things like this. This was in terms of ship navigation. Their ships literally had nothing but the lighthouses, for instance, to get bearings sometimes. And it was the lighthouse was there to help the ships navigate through channels where there might be hazardous rocks and things like this. So it was absolutely essential this light kept working, otherwise the ships might get shipwrecked. One day, so a ship was passing, luckily in good weather, and they had plenty of visibility, and they noticed that the light wasn't on. So a ship then, this was in December 1900. When they got to the port, they reported this, and the lighthouse authorities sent out a boat. As I said, there was no way to phone these people or radio them. They sent a boat out to check everything was okay. When they arrived at the lighthouse, they found something very strange. Everything appeared normal. There was no sign of any struggle, there was no fire in the lighthouse, there was no disaster, there had been no shipwrecks, there was no storms. Everything was in good working order. The light was off because it hadn't been refueled for a number of hours. It had to be refueled every few hours. No sign of any of the 3 lighthouse keepers. They were just gone. And it was weird because everything looked normal. They'd been sitting down. Looked like they'd been sitting down to eat a meal, and their plates were still there. The logbook was open on the desk, and then the last entry had been a few days earlier. And there was no sign. A chair had knocked over. The chair had been knocked over, if I remember rightly. Apart from that, there was literally no sign of any trouble, no sign of any problems. The men had just disappeared. And the authorities went and had a look around. They found no bodies anywhere. I say the weather had been pleasant. There had been no storms. There's no reason to think they'd been washed into the sea or anything like that, because they sometimes used to go out for walks along the coast when they were off duty, because he worked in shift, It's a mystery to this day. These men never reappeared. It's extremely odd indeed, and it's an early example of one of these mysterious disappearance stories. I mean, there are earlier ones, but this is before this sort of thing was popular. What happened to those guys? It's hard to say. After 124 years, it's hard to know we're ever going to find out. There's been all kind of rumours and various conspiracy theories, and also obviously the background of the lighthouse keepers has gone into stories about mysterious connections to smugglers and pirates, secret stashes of gold, bits on the side which they with love triangles and things like that. These always happen when one of these mysterious incidents happens. You always get that. You always get that.
Most rational things first before they come up with anything paranormal. And most people would sort of jump to the sort of Bermuda Triangle thing, but this is in Scotland, nowhere near the Bermuda Triangle.
No. What's more, I must say the Bermuda Triangle is probably something of a distraction. You're getting more ship disappearances there because there's lots of sea lanes in that area.
Yeah.
So statistically, you're going to get more ship disappearances.
That's right.
But ships do mysteriously disappear. Sailors disappear. The Mary Celeste is another good example. This is from the 1870s, where a ship was found drifting close to the Azores. It was a transatlantic cargo ship. And when it was just found simply adrift at sea, it hadn't turned up at its harbour when it was supposed to, and everyone thought, like in those days, sadly, that means it's probably been lost. The ship turns up. They found that the ship's in good working order. There's no damage to it. It's been noticed. It's obviously not been harmed by a storm. Then they thought, oh my God, the pirates have got her. And it's because there was no one on board the ship, and they thought the pirates had got her. But no sign of any struggle, no sign of any mayhem, no dead bodies, and the cargo was still on board the ship. The ship was carrying a cargo of whiskey from Canada to mostly Canadian whiskey to Europe, which on the bootleg market would have been worth a hell of a lot of money. And any pirate the motive for a pirate boarding the ship would be to steal the cargo. Pirates, usually what they would do is they'd board the ship, they'd kill the crew, and they just steal the cargo and put it on their own ship and then go and sell it for a lot of money. That hadn't happened. Also, as with the Flannan Island mysteries, everything seemed in good working order. There was plenty of rations. They hadn't run out of food. There was plenty of fresh water on board. The crew all the crew's belongings were still there. They looked like this. They just sort of like they just got up and they walked out. They found the lifeboat was missing. They got into the lifeboat and obviously left the ship. But why? There's the usual sort of thing. Everything from all kinds of theories have been proposed. Again, usually it's the usual thing: smugglers, pirates, various collaborations, homosexual jealousy, you name it. It's been suggested. None of it makes any sense. All the researchers have gone into the wives, the partners, the fathers, mothers, grandfathers, and every social connection every crew member had.
Yeah,
but there's nothing to suggest. As with Captain Shah of the Malaysian Airlines 370 plane, there's nothing actually to suggest they're in any way connected to anything dodging. So, yeah, it's another big mystery there.
That is incredible. I suppose it would be good to, no one's perhaps suggested it, but it would be good to bring mediums or psychics into this and see if they could pick up any information concerning the fate of those people.
Definitely, yeah. I think there have been several ghost hunts in the area. In the Flannan Lighthouses. It's now disused. It's actually got an automatic light now. Like a lot of lighthouses, it has gone automatic. But there's kind of, I think there's some kind of museum there, and tourists go there. A lot of them just go there because of this mystery.
Yeah.
And so you can actually visit the Flannan Lighthouse.
And getting back to the Portland Lighthouse, Susie, our guide, did say that one of the most sceptical people that works for the team there has actually experienced the most sort of phenomena of anything of a haunted mystery nature, at least. So I asked her, what sort of things is this person picking up? And she goes, she's felt people touch her. She's heard noises in the lighthouse when she's alone by herself. She's seen sort of things. She didn't really elaborate on what sort of things she had seen. I would have loved to have spoken to the witness themselves to try and get to the bottom of it. But it's not a sort of thing you often think of about haunted lighthouses, really. And I've never really heard much reputation of it being a haunted lighthouse. Most people go there as a tourist thing. But it's because we were interested in that sort of thing, I just sort of made a point of asking.
Yeah.
And so she answered. And it wouldn't surprise me with getting back to the Bibby Stockholm. As I said, it's a new kind of vessel there, so it hasn't really got much of a history. But with the unfortunate guy that killed himself, it wouldn't surprise me that people might start reporting strange phenomena as a result of the guy.
It may well be.
Himself. It may well be, yeah. His soul is still there, or something, energy, or something might be causing.
Yeah, it's curious to know. The ghostly phenomena tend to be associated with. Well, no one knows exactly what they are. They may even be more than one phenomenon that we generically categorised together. But they often are associated with deaths that involve anguish or pain. And violence or and fear, which suicide definitely would be included there. This is why hospitals are often haunted, because there is a lot of pain and anguish and fear in them. Battlefields, things like that, and prisons. These places are often haunted, and lighthouses. What you get in lighthouses, I suppose, is a lot of loneliness. Not so much Portland, because it's in a civilized area, but in places like the Flannan Islands, there'd be a lot. There's a film I've never seen actually called The Lighthouse. It's got Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson in it. It's quite a recent film. Again, it's set in the 19th century on a remote island lighthouse, and these two, from what I gather from watching a few clips, the two men become they start behaving differently, and they start to experience some kind of vision associated with the light at the top of the house, the top light at the top of the tower, which they have to maintain. And I'm curious to see. It was actually filmed on a lighthouse, I think, off the coast of Ireland. And I'm curious to see this film at some point. It'd be interesting to watch.
I think it's on Netflix. I started to watch it, but never finished it. Like a lot of things on Netflix.
Yeah, it's easy to go through and down the Netflix rabbit hole occasionally.
Now, when you mentioned briefly about your hospital pouring, and you said, I recall a story where someone on your previous shift, when you were coming in on the night shift or something, a nurse or something had seen something in a room or something.
Yeah, so this was when I'm on a night shift, and I was on duty at the A&E department, and I came on duty, and this happened maybe an hour and a half earlier, just before the evening shift, the nurse's evening shift ended. A nurse in the clinical decisions unit, which is like an overflow area for A&E, encountered a spectral figure and ran out of the room screaming. She was on her own in the department and in the unit, and leaving the unit unattended like that was actually strictly against the rules, although I don't think she got into trouble over it because of the circumstances. And there's always got to be at least one nurse in that area at all times. And she reports she saw a spectral humanoid figure in the unit. It was like a glowing outline kind of a human being. And at the time, there was a resuscitation going on in the resuscitation room.
Right.
Whether there's a connection there, I don't know, because of course, people are always being resuscitated in that room. That's why it's called the resuscitation room. Basically, you get like people they try to bring people back from near death every day. It happens at least once. And in a busy unit and a busy A&E like that, it's a busy department. And this fits in with the experience of other people, such as Dr. Mitchell Gibson. He was a doctor at the Goldwater Hospital in New York City, USA, and he would encounter the spirits of patients all the time, including those that he'd recently seen die. Mm-hmm. And this reason is because he was along with being a doctor, he was also he had spontaneous mediumistic experiences, and I think he wrote a couple of books about it. He's done some interviews about it, which are very interesting. This sort of thing. So this sort of thing is quite common. I mean, there's several other stories of people who have had out of body experience. The near-death experience, of course, is it's not a very recent phenomenon, but it's recently become a more common phenomenon.
Yeah,
it's simple, and it usually happens in hospitals.
Yeah.
And the NDE, the reason it's become more common is because it's only since really the 1960s or 70s we've had modern resuscitation technology, such as defibrillators and various drugs they can give you. So basically, I mean, before that, basically if your heart stopped, they would say, that's it, he's gone. Farewell. But now, if your heart stops, they can sometimes restart it.
Yeah.
And people who've had their heart restarted after experiencing long periods of cardiac arrest report these incredible experiences. And this is why it's become more common for that reason.
This is the thing that, to me, it seems pretty straightforward to me that if there's no such thing as life after death, and these people, the skeptics say, once you're gone, that's it, nothing afterwards, then these people shouldn't be coming back from anywhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is it. They should, I mean, to be fair, I mean, a lot of people do have cardiac arrest and don't experience anything strange. They wake up later and they're okay. But there are those that do. Now, the skeptics are in a bit of trouble explaining this, because a lot of these things happen where you would think that the brain wouldn't be able to, you're not awake. Now, you're not awake and you're not asleep. It's not like having a dream, because your brain is not in a state where it would be dreaming. Now, lately there's been some very interesting experiments by someone called Dr. Jimo Bojgin, and she and her team have actually done experiments on comatose patients, and on 4 comatose patients, with the permission of the relatives, they have put them on penetrative electroencephalograms when the doctors, quote, pull the plug, unquote. So This is someone who's in a profound vegetative state, and they're never going to recover.
Yeah.
So very usually the doctor will say, look, we're going to have to switch them off because they're not going to get better. They're going to die anyway. So what this person found out, and I wrote an article about this just a couple of days ago, is that on 2 of the 4 patients, there was something remarkable happened. The brain seemed to come to life for just about 200 seconds or so. The person's brain seemed to come to life. And this was about 13 minutes after they'd been withdrawn from life support. And there was very much like gamma and theta waves in the brain, which indicates, and also parts of the brain lit up, which indicates waking consciousness and problem solving and things like that. And then eventually this activity ceased, and then all brain activity ceased. But there's several ways of looking at this. I mean, I think the materialists and the skeptics will probably, they may well interpret it on one level, which is to say, well, this is the smoking gun. This is what we've been looking for all along. And we told you NDEs are caused by brain activity, and now we found out that sometimes when people are in the brain has been hypoxic and is virtually dead, it does come to life like that, and that's probably all the NDE is. Well, that's firstly, we don't know the person is experiencing consciousness. All we know is there's certain the areas of the brain are mysteriously coming to life at the very, very end. Secondly, why does the brain do that if that's the case? Why? How does that happen? Is it just an accidental byproduct of our brain's workings? Seems a strange thing. There's no evolutionary advantage for that happening. And also I'd say that it doesn't explain the NDE for several reasons. I think those of us who believe in survival and like the idea, I don't think we have anything to worry about when it comes to this new research, because it doesn't, I think, explain the whole NDE. It doesn't explain people who have specific cases when people have experienced NDEs when this activity is not happening. For example, the lady whose name I can't remember, but she had her heart was stopped deliberately so she could have a certain form of brain surgery. Because she had a flat EEG the whole time. Yeah. And there's the qualitative element to NDEs, which is different. And people describe them, people don't just describe them as being like a dream. It's not like, it's just like, I was awake and I was imagining talking to my grandma and stuff like that. They describe, firstly, it's very lucid. Secondly, it has enormous emotional power. People will describe it as being more real than real. They describe it almost as being like some platonic ideal of whatever they are experiencing. So I don't think that Dr. Boygin's work actually does explain the NDE in that sense. If indeed that is, if the person, obviously they didn't recover and they can't recover now. And somebody actually said to me when because I wrote an article about this, and someone wrote a comment underneath saying, "Oh my God, why don't they just resuscitate them then? Because their brain's coming back." And I said, they can't, because the brain is literally the only thing working at that point. Yeah. And they can't, the reason they pull the plug on them is because everything else, that all the other organs aren't working. The heart doesn't work properly, things like that. And so it's a medical paradox of why this is happening. And what's interesting about Dr. Boygin, I must say, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her name. She's a Chinese lady. Her previous work was with N,N-dimethyltryptamine and its effects on the brain. And so what I suspect is that she has had some kind of collaboration with Dr. Rick Strassman, who himself has worked closely with Graham Hancock and several other researchers. Rick Strassman's an amazing individual because he wanted to study DMT experiments on people's brains and people's visions, and just simply as a psychological study. He was a psychiatrist. He didn't believe in anything spiritual, and what he came out with it with an amazing revelation. Even though he knew this was the DMT was a physiological effect on the brain. So in a sense, it's very similar to what Dr. Boygin discovered about the dying patients. It reveals a spiritual reality. So what he believes he discovered was some kind of a place where spirit and flesh and spirit meet, in a sense. There is a mechanism, a physiological mechanism, which gives us spiritual experiences. There's no reason why our brain should do that. Yeah. There's not anything we don't, 13 minutes after your heart has stopped, there's no evolutionary advantage in you having some kind of, your brain lighting up and giving you some kind of wanton chemical orgy. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. It's an accidental byproduct of our brain, but it's universal across all societies and things.
It's also interesting because, when a lot of people are close to death and not expected to live long, suddenly, for some strange reason, normally, in the last day of their death, just prior to them dying, they suddenly sort of rejuvenate a little bit and can sit up in bed and sort of talk to people for
near-death lucidity.
An hour, and then they snuff it.
Near-death lucidity is very, very interesting now, isn't it? I mean, it reminds you a bit of that. Obviously, this is not near-death. This is like, they're nearly dead, and it's internal lucidity. But yeah, Dr. Peter Fenwick has written about this, about how people suddenly become much more alert towards the end, and they'll sometimes ask to say goodbye to people. They'll also report that they'll still say things like, "Oh, your granddad's over there. He's standing behind you." Granddad's dead. No, he's standing right there.
Yeah.
They'll report encounters with angelic figures and things like that.
Yeah.
So I believe this. I don't believe that this is the materialist smoking gun.
Yeah.
I think I think it adds to the entire mystery of NDEs, and it could be, I think, as much interest to a survivalist as to a materialist.
But of course, there's Ibrahim Alexander, who was a brain, I think he still is a brain doctor, but he actually had, I think he was in a coma. His brain was pretty much destroyed or something, and not exactly sure on the medical scale where he was cast as being dead or just in a deep coma or something. But he's written a book about his adventures on the other side, where he actually claimed that he met his deceased sister.
Yeah.
Whilst he was out dead in this coma or something, where they were just keeping his body alive. But he said he shouldn't have actually survived this. He should have actually died.
No, it's a very common feature, actually, is the meeting the dead relatives. You have like the tunnel. It often begins with an OBE. A typical one begins with an OBE. So the out of body experience. So you just above your body looking down. Now some NDs end there, and then you just then you recover consciousness. But then others then find themselves going up, moving away from that position to a tunnel of light. That goes up to, they go up to a light, and then they find themselves in what Dr. Fenwick calls the area, which is a location that's often very pleasant. It's often very natural. It's like a garden. Some people describe it as being like a garden with like trees and flowers and birds flying in the trees and things like that. And that's very often where you have encounters with relatives who've died. You appear to be, who very often they're pleased to see you, but then they say, "It's great to see you, but you're going to have to go back. This isn't your time. You have to go back." And then they regain consciousness and they're back in our world. It really is. It was something that fascinates me, and I think it should be of interest. It's in the interest of all of us to explore this, because this is an experience we all are going to have to face at some point. It's the one certainty of our future.
Yeah,
is that our physical life on this world will come to an end, and we're going to have to take a leap into the dark and find out whatever happens next time.
It's interesting. My mum, when she passed away suddenly, totally unexpectedly in 2016, she actually passed away with an aortic aneurysm, although we didn't know that at the time. About 10 months later, she came back through via an Ouija board session with some people that we'd never met before. We had gone to that house. We were like extra bums on seats because there had been a cancellation of a booking. So we were phoned up that morning. Would we be willing to go along to this session? Totally last minute thing. We thought, oh yeah, okay. So we took our audio recorder, and lo and behold, my mum came through as one of the last sort of spirits to visit, if you want to call it that. And one of the questions I asked her, I was obviously shocked that my mum had come through. So I was kind of pleased as well, as of course you can imagine. But so I said, "Have you met your mum and dad yet?" And she goes, "Yes, my mum came and met me," which was very interesting. So about a year after that, I had a second session with this duo who was doing a Ouija board. And this time I was more prepared because I knew I was going to go to it. So I thought, right, if my mum comes through, I've got a whole list of kind of scientific questions to ask her, as well as how are you and that kind of stuff, the social sort of set. And I said, when we spoke last time, you said your mum came and met you. So what happened? Did you go through a tunnel of light or anything like that? And she said, no. She goes, my mum was waiting in the corner of the room, waiting for me to die, sort of thing. And then she took me. So it's like the dead are waiting there to collect the newly departed dead, because they already know they're going to die and they're waiting to collect them. Now, the interesting thing as well about my gran, who collected my mum, her mum, we call her Granny Bob, it was just a family name. She actually died in New Zealand. She'd emigrated to New Zealand after her husband, my grandfather, died maybe 3 years earlier. And she decided she wanted a change of life, a new start. And so she emigrated. She went through the loopholes, emigrated to New Zealand. Her sister was there, her stepsister was there. So she started a new life with her. Never ever saw her again, basically, because she died out there after 6 months of being out there. She had only been 6 months out there. But I remember prior to her going, one of my brothers was staying with her to keep her company. And he said, Granny Bob, do you believe on life on other planets? You know, he's like 14 at the time. Sorry. And she goes, no, and I don't believe in life after death either.
I anticipate his next question.
And it's like, so I looked and I thought about that. So it's funny, she had no belief in life after death, and yet here she was, like 40 plus years later, collecting my mum from the threshold known as death.
Well, if there is an afterlife, I think we've got a good reason to be hopeful. I don't know for certain. I mean, there's no way to know for certain until you've got to wait till it's your turn. But I think we've got a good reason to be hopeful. I'm quite positive there is. Then it's something that, whether you believe it or not, you will get to enjoy it at some point. Hopefully enjoy it anyway. At one point. So if you don't believe in it, when you die, presumably you say, oh, and then you'll say, well, do you believe in it? You'll actually experience it, then you'll have to believe in it.
It's funny because there was this skeptic guy who was debating with me over comments on YouTube. And I was putting some comments to this psychic person. Everyone's saying, oh, this psychics are all fake. They're all mediums are fake, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, hang on, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? Blah, 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 blah. And he said, I feel sorry for you because, like, when you'll die, you'll find that there'll be nothing. And I said, well, what do you mean? How can I find there be nothing?
Yes,
I'm dead. That
exactly.
makes sense, you know. And how can you feel sorry for me? Because if there's nothing and you think I'm going to be disappointed, I can't be disappointed if I don't exist.
That's it. If you feel disappointment, obviously you still exist.
Yes. Yeah. Did you realise what he was saying?
Yeah, that's a very odd thing to say. Yeah, that's a very odd way to put it.
Yeah. So
Richard Dawkins says, I don't fear death at all, because for me, my own death is essentially, from my position, is a non-event, because it is the termination of my existence. Therefore, why should I be afraid of that when I won't exist to either fear it or enjoy it or suffer from it? I feel sorry for my relatives, because they, of course, will miss me, and they will be sad. People who love me will be very sad that I've gone. But I myself will suffer no consequences at all, any more than the eternity that existed before my birth. So, that's an odd thing for a skeptic to say.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that I'll always win an argument with a person over whether there's life after death or not. Because the thing is, at the end of it, either we're both dead and so we can't claim to be the winner, or we do survive the grave and then I can claim to be the winner. And say, there you go, I told you this.
Well, this is it's funny because that sort of thing does happen. There's a guy I know called Paul Davids, who I've interviewed a couple of times. He's an interesting chap, actually. He produced the Roswell movie, the film about Roswell. I think it was in the 90s. Yeah, he made a film, but he's made another documentary since then called the Life After Death Project.
Yeah,
in which he describes his own encounters with the spirit of his departed friend, whose name was Forrest J. Ackerman. Now, this is a guy who supposedly invented the term science fiction.
Yeah.
He was a big science fiction fanatic, and his whole house was a museum to sci-fi. He died in 2016. He was quite old by then, and he and Paul have been good friends for a long time. And Forrest had always been an atheist and a materialist. He never believed in any form of life after death. But Paul, then something strange happened with Paul sometime after Forrest died. Paul was he was just in his study, and he's got like a little desk in his bedroom, and he printed something out for work, and he pulled it out of the printer and he just threw it onto the bed, and he went off and did something and came back later. When he came back, he found something strange. There was an ink blot on the page, which appeared to be covering up some of the words of a letter of the phrase was "spoke to Joe Amodi," and an ink blot had covered up a few of the letters of that phrase. Now, I don't have time to go into detail, but basically, what was left with the ink covering it up was the phrase, a phrase which sounds like one of the jokes that Forrest Ackerman used to tell.
Right.
He used to like verbal jokes.
Yeah.
He had his own way of making the little quips when it comes to different words and different phrases. And Paul said, my goodness, that's...
Bit of a coincidence.
Yeah, that sounds like something that Forrest would have told to me. And what's more, where did the ink blot come from? It wasn't on the sheet when he took it out the printer. In fact, Paul had the ink tested, and it actually wasn't the kind of ink you get in printer toner anyway.
Yeah.
It was some other kind of ink, and they couldn't quite identify what type.
Right.
And he said, is this Forrest sending me a message from the beyond? And then he started looking into it, and he found that other people had had experiences, strange coincidences, computers doing weird things like strange emojis appearing. One guy was some people who went to Forrest's grave, and they came back and they found the computer did something very strange. Also, Forrest Ackerman's house, which is now a kind of museum to his life, was there's shadow beings have been reported there. And it's as if maybe Forrest did get to the other side and said, oh, wow, Paul was right all along. I better find some way to tell him. That kind of thing. Yeah. So it's an amazing documentary, The Life After Death Project.
I'll have to look into that. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that I've always professed that when I get to the other side and I've acclimatized to the new conditions over there, whatever they may be, I hope I'm acclimatized, that I would then find a way of communicating with those left behind. Now, the obviously easy way of communicating, I say easy way, it might be difficult, but I'm assuming it would be slightly easier than trying to do things like making marks on ink blots, would be through a medium. And so those around me, for instance, my wife, my daughter, probably not my son because he's a little bit skeptical, but my wife and my daughter would presumably seek out a medium or try and see one at some point, and maybe hope that I could send some messages via that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, there's several different things you could do. I mean, I personally would... I quite like the idea of a coded message as well. I mean, Harry Houdini did this. Now, Houdini actually died very suddenly in 1926 after he got into a fight with someone and suffered an injury which killed him. But he did actually produce a coded message which he left with his wife, Les. Now, and as you're probably aware, Houdini was a diehard skeptic.
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of the James Randi of his time. He used to go around exposing fakes and things like that. And but it's possible he left the door just slightly ajar, the possibility that he would experience an afterlife, and if so, he could find a way to get back. But he did warn, because he knew there was a lot of fraud, or what he perceived as a lot of fraud in the industry. He left a coded message with his wife. Now, this is where it gets a bit weird, because if you look at the various histories of Houdini and his life that have been written in recent times, you'll learn that that Bess, even though Bess spent the rest of her life going to various mediums and holding seances, she never received a coded message from Houdini. And you may also be aware that the Harry Houdini fan club meets every Halloween night, and every Halloween night they hold a ceremonial a seance for Harry Houdini. And the thing about it is that which is interesting, because Houdini died on Halloween night.
Right.
Very spooky. And but I actually came across something very, very strange. I came across the Reader's Digest Encyclopedia of the Paranormal. So one of the other porters gave it to me, actually. It was from 1983, so it's quite old. And in there, it actually reports that Houdini did get back to Bess and left the coded message.
Yeah.
I wrote an article about this on her panel called The Houdini Code. And I just thought, firstly, it's interesting that exists, and secondly, it's been omitted from recent histories. Although, strangely enough, after all this time, I gasped when I saw this. It has been acknowledged in a recent film, one that's just been released, called Nandor Fodor and the Talking Mongoose, which is a rather historically inaccurate film about the Jeff the Talking Mongoose mystery from the Isle of Man. And so I just thought it was very strange that that story just disappeared from history. Then it's now come back all of a sudden in a recent film, and I just think that's very odd.
That's crazy.
It's extremely odd. It's extremely crazy. To me, this is almost as weird as someone's brain coming back to life when they're about to die. So it's one of those strange things that happens in this world, Neil.
So that suggests to me then that although Houdini was trying to expose these fake mediums, the very fact that he had decided on this course of action, I'll give my wife a code that I'll relay from the other side, it suggests to him that he must have believed in it. He just hadn't found the right mediums. So he's kind of saying, look, in the potential possibility that I might survive the grave, I'll give you a coded message. He assumes it's going to be an easy way just to get a coded message from a medium. Of course, mediumship is a very difficult thing to do. It's not as easy as people seem to think.
No.
I mean, a lot of these skeptics, well, why don't they tell them their name, address? Why don't they tell them their phone number? Or why don't they say, it's actually very, very difficult. It's the equivalent of trying to send smoke signals across a mountain.
Extremely.
You know, when you got a Native American on a mountain trying to send a smoke signal, they can't tell you their bank account number, their phone number, or how many children they might have. They can just maybe give you 2 puffs of smoke, warning, there's danger ahead of something, you know.
Exactly, it's a code. Yeah, it's like a code. I mean, exactly, and it's also, I must say that mediums vary in quality, and I think there's a bit of the Dunning-Kruger effect with mediums because a lot of them overestimate their own abilities. And I mean, I don't believe that you know what the skeptics say is they're all fakes or crazy. No, it's not that. Most of them, I think, are just perfectly ordinary people, but they do, and a lot of them have a real gift, and a lot of them go to development circles to try and make it to create skills to improve their abilities. But they still have a limited. I feel they still have a limited ability to interpret messages from the other side.
Well, how it is that often they're getting it. The most common form of mediumship is what they call clairvoyance, which is to see. And the medium, and I know this myself because I do it myself, will get impressions sent by the other side. That's the theory of it anyway. I can't say that's the science of it, but the theory is that the spirits on the other side will impress you telepathically. And sometimes they can get a feeling across or an idea or a thought across, and sometimes they'll show you visual things, and sometimes it's both at the same things. For instance, last year I was doing a demonstration of mediumship here in Weymouth, and there was a lady there. I never met her before, but I felt drawn to give her a message, and I was giving her various bits of information. All was being accepted, and then suddenly I was presented, and I visually saw it as a pair of hands just being held out to me like that. And I felt the word or the feeling, or I just had a feeling that something medically wrong was with the pair of hands. Like either an injury or something medically wrong with these hands. They weren't quite normal, and I wasn't quite sure. So you never given the whole story, but you're given a clue. Now, I've got to relay this to the person. There's something. So I said, look, I don't know if this is yourself or some relatives around you, people you know, but does anyone that you know have a problem with their hands, whether they've injured their fingers or had a problem with their broken nails? But I feel that someone's got a pair of hands and there's something medically wrong with them in some way. And she says, yes, I can take that. She goes, it's not me. She goes, it's my brother and my father. And they were the people that are actually communicating this through me. So I found out. So she explained to me because I was giving her information, but I didn't know who's coming from. And she said, I think you got my father and my brother there. And basically she said both her father and her brother both had a condition which she said thankfully hasn't been passed on to me, but they were both born with their thumbs, and instead of having a normal human thumb, they'd got the equivalent of having a big toe on their hand. I don't know what it's called scientifically or medically speaking, but they both had it. And so what I was getting through was actually technically correct. And I think either the father or the brother was coming through and trying to impress upon me this information. Again, it was something unique to those two people and no one else. And it would only fit them. And I was getting something that's medically wrong with fingers, and you know someone in your family with that issue. And she said, yes, it was my father and my brother.
Hey.
Yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting to get that.
Yeah.
Now, again, the father or the brother couldn't give me their phone number. They couldn't tell me their bank accounts. They might be able to tell me an area that they've come from. One of the things I did pick up was that one of them went out on a fishing trip, and I felt so emotionally disturbed on this fishing trip. And I wanted to say, I felt so disturbed that I wanted to say that someone either drowned or nearly drowned, but I felt I didn't have the confidence to say that. So all I said was, I feel something drastically has happened on this fishing trip to make everyone really emotionally upset on this fishing trip. And she goes, yes, I can tell that. And she said, someone nearly drowned. And I thought, Jesus, I nearly got it. I should have said it, you know. But there are mediums that are way up the league. They're very far and few between, but they can get names, dates. There was a guy called Ross Bartlett, and he gave me some fantastic information about 7 years ago now. He was 23 at the time, so I put him, he's probably about 30 years old now, I suppose. Young by my standards anyway. But I'd heard good things about him, and Monica and I, that's my wife, we'd gone to Ruislip to see this guy, and we knew it was in a certain building, And we had seen on the internet the building looked rather like a medieval old building with black and white beams and things like that. So we thought, oh, that'd be easy to find. And when we got there, we got to the area, and there's actually 5 buildings, and they all look the same. And we thought, oh, crikey, which one do we go in? We're running late because of traffic. So we went in the first building. No, it's not this one. It's a wedding receptionist. We went to the next building. And we're totally confused about which building. And finally, we saw a door open on one of them. And so we went there, and we could hear a voice. And we thought, oh, this must be it. And we sort of quietened our voices. And there was a man in a T-shirt there, or a shirt, a blue shirt. And he said, I'll go in and pay your money at the end. And he was like doing the money on the door. He goes, go and sit at those chairs over there, and you can get paid with the cash afterwards. We said, oh, thank you. So we went and quietly sort of sat in. We'd only be sitting in there for 5 minutes, and Ross Bartlett, the medium, was giving a reading to some lady already. And then as soon as he finished that lady, he suddenly turned to me. And he said, I'd like to come to the gentleman on my left. And I thought, oh, blimey, I've only just been here. I only got here just late. So I pressed record on my audio recorder. So it's recorded this thing for anyone that wants to analyse it or even explain it. The skeptics would have trouble explaining this one.
Well, they'd say he's a fraud. He hot read you.
Researched me.
Yeah.
But this is when...
broke into your house and went through your diary. Yeah.
This is very difficult to explain. So basically, we got in this building, and this guy says, go and sit down there. You can pay me the money afterwards. And we said, thank you very much. And then Ross Bartlett, he was already doing a reading on someone. And after that, he literally turned to me and said, I'd like to come to the gentleman on my left. And I thought, oh, my God, it's me. So I started recording it. And basically, he said, I've got a lady here called Agnes. And I thought, well, I don't know anyone called Agnes. I thought he must have the wrong person for him. So I don't know anyone called Agnes. He says, well, she knows you. So, oh, here we go. So, this sounds a bit fishy. So, but she said she'd like to mention Morgan. And I thought, oh, my God, Morgan is the name of my daughter. And so I sort of sat up and I thought, this is a bit interesting. And she likes to visit Morgan because she loves children or something. And my daughter was quite young then. So apparently she spent a lot of time around Morgan as a spirit when Morgan was growing up and stuff. And anyway, so she went on, and then she said, is your brother, can you get hold of your brother? And I said, well, yeah, kind of. I could probably ring him. Maybe you might want to ring him because he just confirmed that he goes around graveyards. And Agnes is want to say that she sees your brother Phil. And that was, again, Phil is true. My brother Phil goes around family graveyards to hunt down family members on old forgotten graves in gravesites. And he apparently been to this person's grave. And so then she said, he said, oh, I'm not sure about this. He said, hang on a minute. He goes, okay, let's go for it. He said, do you see that man over there on the door, by the door in the blue shirt? That was the man that let me in. He said, go and sit down. I said, yeah. He said, his name is Chris Hayes. And as soon as he said that, I thought, oh my God. And he said, they're telling me, or Agnes is telling me, that Morgan, my daughter, is also connected to a Chris Hayes. And I said, yes, I'd like to confirm that my daughter has been going out with a guy also called Chris Hayes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, what is the odds of that guy being called Chris Hayes? He's come in, said the name of my daughter, and he said the name of my daughter's boyfriend, and he happens to have the same name as the guy that let me in. And I thought, what is that? How could they have done that? And I thought about this afterwards. I thought, this is presumably why he came to me straight away, because he had the energy in his mediumship at that point, and they had this 3-pronged attack where they could kind of say this Chris Hayes name, which was a 1 in a million chance to sort of say that sort of thing, And anyway, I told my mum this, and I played her a recording, but we didn't know who this Agnes was. And she was telling my Auntie Sue, my mum was relating the whole experience to my Auntie Sue over the phone. And Auntie Sue says, well, I know Auntie who Agnes is. She goes, that's your Auntie Doris. And I thought, well, I know Auntie Doris. And apparently my Auntie Doris, it wasn't her real name. Apparently her real name was Agnes, as the reading said. And but she never liked that name. So she called herself by her middle name, which was Doris. So everyone knew her name as Doris, and I never knew all these years her name was Agnes. And yet she was coming through to prove a point. You see, something that they couldn't even look up. So I thought that was a really good example of mediumship. And if there's a skeptic out there can explain how it was done, I'd be interested to hear it.
I suppose the answer they give you would be that this guy must have broken into your house and photocopied your diary or something. Which, of course, that to me is what I call the clown's day off fallacy. And this is the essentially what's meant by that is that if someone photographs the Loch Ness monster and you tell a skeptic about it, they'll say, no, that's a clown with a day off from the circus playing a trick on you. And you might ask me, what clown? Do you know this clown? Who is it? Tell me all about him. It says, I don't know what clown it is. It's just that's more likely. So what the skeptic is doing essentially, what they've turned is that debunking becomes an exercise of the imagination. You can debunk something without any evidence at all. You just simply have to make something up. And it wins by default because it doesn't involve strange lizards in Scottish lochs. And to me, through some principle the skeptic never explains, but that's just wins by default. And so if a skeptic said that, and then firstly, that's a very serious matter to accuse this guy of a crime, of fraud, firstly breaking and entering and fraud. It's also a fact that this guy this skeptic has just made something up about this person.
Yeah.
Without no evidence at all, just says, yeah, but it doesn't involve spirits, so it wins by default. It has to be real. You have to accept that as real in the absence of any other evidence. And I don't accept that. I think that is bad logic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's a very remarkable experience.
Yeah.
It's very rare you get mediumship that good. And it does happen. It does happen.
He is one in a few thousand.
There are some mediums. I mean, there was a lady I knew called Shirley Bolstock, I think, she gave me a very good reading. I won't go into details because it's a little bit touchy personally.
Yeah.
But she told me some remarkable things. Sadly, she's on the other side herself now, unfortunately. She died a few months ago. But yeah, and there are some really, really good mediums in places.
Yeah, I mean, that particular reading bowled me over because it was the fact that they could bring these two names of Chris Hayes together. They'd have Chris Hayes, this guy who worked for him. He was the guy that used to drive him around because Ross didn't drive at the time. I don't know if he does now, but he didn't drive anywhere. So this guy was like his driver who would drive into things, events and that, and kind of look after him, and he would take the money on the door sort of thing. And people would say, oh, well, you must have booked your tickets and, he knew where you're going to sit and stuff like that. And in fact, that's not the case because I had got my tickets through a guy who knew me, and he would just reserve some seats, that's all. And so he didn't have a floor plan of where anyone was sitting. And also the fact is that how could they logically connect Chris Hayes that was with my daughter to the Chris Hayes that was the guy that was doing the tickets? I mean, that is a 1 in a million kind of weird connection, isn't it?
Yeah.
A spooky connection. And the fact is that they gave my daughter's name, he gave my brother's name. He also mentioned about my Welsh grandfather, and apparently said my Welsh grandfather says, carry on doing the artwork. And I thought, well, how does he know I do artwork, And people say, oh, but they get it all off Facebook. But Agnes was never mentioned on Facebook because I didn't even know her name was Agnes. And so there's no way of breaking into my diary because I never write about my Auntie Doris, let alone Agnes. But it was the fact is that he could have said, I'm picking up a mystical name of Morgan or anything like that. Does that mean? And I thought, well, yeah, it would mean something to me. But to get the name of Chris Hayes and the fact that this guy was called Chris Hayes was a blinder for me.
Yeah.
A blinder. So we're going to move on to another topic, something that I sent you recently. And I was quite impressed that I found this actually. It's to do with the US Air Force actually commissioning a study into teleportation.
This is unbelievable. I mean, what exactly could it possibly be? It's not science fiction. Unfortunately, I haven't actually read all the document you sent me, but what's it all about?
So basically, I think this occurred in about 2003 or 4. It's about 20 odd years ago they did this, and I don't know if there's any follow-ups to it, but they commissioned this kind of physics expert who ran his own company called Warp Drive Industries or something like that. Yeah, appropriate name, I guess. And he was basically writing about all the possibilities of teleportation. Is it possible in present-day quantum physics? And he was basically setting setting the stage for what they currently know about it. Because I guess the Air Force, presumably, for some reason, why they wanted to know about it, was connected with UFOs. It wasn't really mentioned. But why did the Air Force take an interest in teleportation, for starters? I mean, they're to do with, flying aircrafts. And, why would they want to know about teleportation? It seems a bizarre thing for them to commission an investigation into. What piqued that curiosity, I wonder?
I don't know. I mean, it's a strange tale. Well, it's an interesting, warp drive is a bit of that's a great name for a company. But you see, teleportation has been observed, believe it or not, among subatomic particles. In other words, quantum physics. So, for example, someone did an experiment once where they fired neutrons at an impermeable barrier. In other words, it was like heavy metal, like lead or something. And believe it or not, some of these neutrons actually did. They kind of put what this scientist said. This was done at Lawrence Livermore Laboratories. The neutrons could not have passed through the barrier, or more neutrons than would normally pass through that barrier appeared on the other side, indicating that through the vagaries of quantum physics, it is possible actually to teleport from one place to another, along with all the other weird stuff to do with quantum physics, superposition and things like that, and spooky action at a distance, entanglement and stuff. But you see, it's teleportation. If you describe it as an object or something moving, essentially disappearing in one place and reappearing in another, that can be done through the Einstein-Rosen bridge, the wormhole. And this is what is often used in science fiction to allow, as a plot device, essentially, to allow people on a spaceship. And indeed, this guy's called Warp Drive. This company's called Warp Drive. Warp Drive is a plot device from Star Trek that allows the Starship Enterprise to travel vast different distances in space within the lifetimes of the grandchildren of the crew. So which wouldn't happen in real life without that. But the warp drive, that is the ability to essentially bypass long distances in space, or even short distances in space, exists in theory. It was worked out more than 100 years ago by Albert Einstein and someone called Rosen. I don't know what his other name was, but there was a paper published over a century ago in which they describe how, in theory, this could happen through these wormholes, what's called wormholes. Now, there was no practical way of doing this. Indeed, today we know, we're supposedly, certainly in publicly available science, there's no way of knowing how to create wormholes that actually exist. If they did, it would be very, very interesting. But because if they exist in secret, then it'd be very interesting if that secret is declassified, because it would allow, for example, we could create transport systems that were far superior to any other. It means we could travel vast distances instantly. We literally step through a door and you could go and visit your friend in Australia, for example, by just stepping through a little door. And that's just the start of it. You wouldn't, even Australia, distance would no longer be an object. So you could visit Australia, but you could also visit a distant planet in another galaxy in the same way. If we could find a practical way to make this work safely and effectively. A lot of science fiction horror actually concerns the use of wormholes and them going wrong. Something horrible happens when they go wrong. The Dark, for example, the German TV series about that. Yeah. So, if it's strange because there's a guy called Ashton Forbes who's made an astonishing claim. He mentioned earlier the MH370 disappearance, the strange mystery of an aeroplane. An entire airline that disappeared almost 10 years ago, just vanished into thin air while it was on the journey between Malaysia and China. He has found a film which appears to show these strange objects with, I don't know what you call them, with, is it someone else? Sorry, I think it's Monica. Oh, with these, there's a picture, basically this video shows an airline, it's a Boeing 777, like MH370, you can't identify exactly, flying along, and these UFOs are chasing it, these little strange white ovoid things, and then three of them suddenly start circling this aircraft, just at equal distance all the way around it, just going around it like that as it's flying along. Then there's a flash of light and everything disappears. Orbs, aircraft, everything. And Ashton Forbes, he says this is not extraterrestrial, he believes. He says this is basically secret government technology being used to teleport the plane.
Where to, though?
Exactly. I mean, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to read more of the literature you sent me.
It's interesting because they talked about Stargates, which is interesting because you would think that's the TV series, but the word Stargate is taken from some of this scientific research. And towards the end of it, he was talking about aspects of teleportation in nature. And so he's used an example where in China, communist China, they've done experiments there. And they found, for some reason, Chinese kids, I don't know why it's Chinese kids of all people, they could teleport objects through walls. And this was observed by scientists, credible people. And these kids had the ability somehow to bring objects. I can't remember what objects they were, small items, from one room to another. And they were doing typical Uri Geller stuff, bending spoons, that kind of stuff as well. But the other thing was that they had to teleport things. They couldn't explain how they did it. They just knew that it was happening in some strange, weird way. And why it was children, don't know. Maybe they're kind of like they're easy to locate in that sense, because when you're an adult and you're doing a job in China, you perhaps want to suppress these abilities if you've got them because you don't want to come to the attention of the authorities. But somehow children don't realise that sort of stuff, that you should suppress these things. They're perhaps doing it as fun, and people start to pick up on it. Maybe, I don't know. That's my theory behind it. But so if they knew that like 20 years ago, what do they know now about teleportation?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's obviously something that they're keeping secrets they want to use for their own private purposes, like so much else, like free energy, like anti-gravity and things like this. Obviously, if it could be, you could do a lot of good with this sort of thing if it was used. I mean, the practical applications of such technology, if they were allowed to everyone, would be limitless. And I've already described a few of them. It would revolutionize space exploration beyond all belief. It would transportation, things like that. Oh, it could be used for all kinds of things. And I suppose it could also, I'm sure someone would think of some way to weaponize it. It could be used to spy on people. It could be in a tyrannical regime. It could be used as the ultimate surveillance state.
Yeah.
Things like that. You could literally have like hidden cameras in everywhere, anywhere you wanted to. You could teleport them wherever you want.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, I mean, actually in spiritualism, they have a thing called apples, which are these objects that in seances, they would be objects that would be teleported by the spirits that are running the seance, and they might take them, say, I know there's one example where they take something like a ring or something like that, or a brooch or something from an Egyptian tomb in ancient Egypt, and they teleported it into the room of this seance somewhere in Britain. And they typically would fall through the ceiling and just land on the table. And in Helen Duncan's seances, similar things happened. And so in other seances, I think it was in the Skull experiment, a newspaper from the 1940s, at the time of Helen Duncan, sort of fell through the ceiling, and it had a news report about Helen Duncan on this newspaper, and they tested it all out, and the paper and the ink were from the 1940s.
Yeah, that's an important point, because I mean, of course, the skeptics will say, well, you just went and got a back copy from the newspaper office, because you can go and order a back copy of any edition for a reasonable price, and indeed people do it as a novelty. You can like they say, order newspaper from the year they were born and things like this, but it will be printed on fresh paper, or we're using modern printer toner. But this particular, as you just said, it was printed in a particular kind of ink which had a lot of tar in it, which is not made nowadays. And the reason they used this kind of ink in the war is because of rationing.
Yeah.
And and of course, if it was an original newspaper, then the paper would have deteriorated. It would have turned bright yellow, because paper does actually. They say if you've got an old book, it might look a bit yellow, some of the paper. The reason is because paper contains a chemical called lignin, which oxidizes. When it mixes with the air, there's a chemical reaction which makes it turn yellow.
Yeah.
So that's that I think is an important point. So reports, I think, are very, very real. And again, this is the kind of thing that when things just appear in midair, this indicates that spirit has the ability to influence our world. This is essentially physical mediumship, in which spirit actually causes changes in our world of a supernatural nature, which I think is really, but despite the skeptics saying it's all fake, it's all nonsense, I've witnessed this myself. I witnessed a physical medium called Jason Harrington transfigure his own hands. And I mean, I don't know if there's any other explanation for what he did. His hands, his fingers stretching out, his fingernails turning red. He was sitting literally about as far away from me as you are, and I saw his hands do this.
That's interesting. I know who you're talking about because he was called J Love as well, wasn't he?
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
He had another name. He went by another name called J Love for a while anyway. And I'd gone and seen him do a demonstration of doing the same kind of phenomena in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. And they blacked out all the windows. It was a hall. And I actually saw nothing. I have to be honest. I'll sort of say, but I saw nothing. He had 2 infrared lamps placed on the table, on the floor in front of him, and the lamps would be shining up at his face. So it had that almost Hammer horror kind of Dracula look, with the lights sort of shining on your face. And we all watched, and I could hear people behind me going, "Oh, wow, look at that. Oh, my God," And I was looking, and I was thinking, I can't see a thing. What's going on? Why can't I see it? And halfway through, he sort of... said, "Is there any questions?" And so I said, "Yeah, can you?" He was sort of supposed to be talking as a guide, by the way, at this point. His spirit guide was saying, "Any questions?" So I said, "Yeah, can you bring through anyone?" And he goes, "Yes, we can try." He says, "Come and sit with me, my friend." So I had to go and sit in front of him, in front of everybody else that was watching. So I literally had a front row seat, literally, and I had to hold his hands whilst he did this. And he sort of went forward and he says, "I can feel a man coming through." And I thought, "Oh, that could be good. Could be my friend that's passed away. So maybe it's him. I don't know." So I was waiting in anticipation, thinking, "Okay, come on through." And then he would sort of step forward into the light, lean his face forward into these 2 infrared lights. So the idea was that I would then see my friend's face, or someone's face at least, transfigured or superimposed over his face. But I absolutely saw nothing. And so I said, "I'm sorry, I can't see anything." So he said, "I will try again." So he moved his face out of the light and he goes, "We'll try another time." So he moved forward again and I looked and I could hear again people behind me going, "Oh, look at that, look at that, look at the ears getting bigger." And I was thinking, "What? I can't see a damn thing." And I said, "I'm sorry." You feel pressure, so much pressure to sort of say, "Oh, thank you very much, that's lovely." But I thought, no, to be honest, stick to my guns. I said, "I'm sorry, I can't see a thing." So again, he said, "We'll try one more time, my friend." And he moved his head out the lights like this. And then he moved it one more time back in. So this is the 3rd time he's moving his face in the light. And I looked, I said, "Sorry, can't see a thing." So he then said to the lady that had organised this, Jeanette or whatever, he says, "Jeanette, make sure our friend gets a full refund." Like that.
Oh, well, yeah.
She goes, "All right, I heard. So, but I'm still owed the money. Spirit World owed me 20 quid.
Oh, right. That's what obviously they didn't tell Jason himself, the ones that were channeling.
Yeah, that's right. They forgot to wake him up and tell him that. Yeah. But no, don't worry, Jason, if you're watching, I'm not going to hassle you for the catch. But I just was being honest, I saw nothing. But Ben, you had a positive.
I did, yes. And Jason allowed me. He didn't charge me, actually, because I'd done an interview with Gene Skinner, which he was very appreciative of. Gene Skinner is actually a transfiguration medium.
From the Northeast?
Yeah. She passed away a couple of months after our interviews. She's quite old. She's a pretty old lady, but she was this Geordie lady who lived somewhere north of Newcastle in Northumberland. Yeah, and then she's got some photographs of some of the transfigurations she did, which include facial changes.
Yeah.
Essentially an ectoplasmic mask and hand changes and things like that. So,
apparently transfiguration has happened to me many, many years ago. I was experimenting with channeling. And my girlfriend at the time was a medium, and she was sort of basically watching me at the end of the bed. I was sitting on the bed, and I had I think she had a torch, that's right, and she was reading a set of questions that I'd pre-prepared. Can you ask this spirit guide, who I'd apparently got coming through? And I was sort of channeling his voice, and she said that she saw this sort of mist around my face. So she put her hand over the torch to try and see clearly, because it was sort of like distracting her a little bit. And she said she saw the face of this Victorian gentleman, complete with sideboards, talking over my face. And every time my mouth opened, his mouth opened in synchronization, like I was wearing a mask. I was totally unaware of that, but that's what I was told happened.
wow, that's
Yeah. I mean, I said it could have been Elvis. I was all shook up. But interesting experience. Now, we'll talk, one little last thing we'll talk about, and then we'll wrap this up. And there was another medium from the Northeast. I think it was can't remember exactly where. Somewhere in where is it that they do it?
Truth Seekers Northeast.
Yeah.
Oh, Wall's End.
Yeah, but what's the actual big city that it's in?
Newcastle.
Newcastle. That's it. Around
Pontine, yeah.
Pontine, yeah. Or he might have come from Durham. I'm not sure which. But there's a guy called Hunter Selkirk who was basically a medium in the 1950s and 60s. And he had an uncanny ability at mediumship. He's a very humble man by all accounts. And I never met him. I found only one thing on the newspaper, a cut-in about where he gave some accurate information at Spiritualist Church. But he was a very good physical medium. In other words, he could go into trance and produce this phenomenon of ectoplasm would come out of him and form into physical beings, the spirits. And there's one time he actually said to some people that were with him, and he said, "Oh, should we try some table tilting?" And they said, "Oh, yeah." So they literally got the table, they put it into the middle of the room, and instantly, without any sort of like further movement or action or anything like that, Hunter Selkirk just suddenly slumped into a trance. And the people that were standing there witnessed this ectoplasm come out of his nose and get sort of start to form into two sort of small masses on the table that they'd put in the room. And these masses grew into about a foot high each figures, and they became solid white figures of people, but only a feet high. And they're both dressed in Elizabethan costumes. And one was a man and one was a lady. So both an Elizabethan man and an Elizabethan lady as fully materialized figures, but only about a foot high each. And they turned and bowed to each other. And then they turned and bowed to the men that were witnessing them, like very politely. And they said they could see the lace on their wrists and collars. They could see their buckles and everything in full detail, but completely white. And then they just melted back down. And then the ectoplasm went back into Hunter Selkirk's nose. And he woke up and he goes, "Oh, has anything happened? Did I miss anything?" He's completely unaware it happened.
That's a very typical manifestation medium experience. And it's actually very rare. But it can be done. I mean, there's only a handful of people who have that ability in the world. Helen Duncan was actually considered one of the most powerful ever.
Yeah.
But others, for example, Victor and Wendy Zammit have explored the manifestation mediums, and they do exist. And this is where literally they can conjure up ghosts out of nowhere. And I mean, the skeptics say it's all fake, and they're using cheesecloth there. They're regurgitating cheesecloth, which is, I've never tried that. I wouldn't. Don't try it at home, for goodness sake. You'll probably kill yourself. But they will say this is how it's done. I don't believe that myself.
No.
And I find it these stories incredibly.
The skeptics, always the experts of how it's done, but they never actually go to these seances to actually try and investigate themselves. But they tell you how it's all done.
Yeah, they'll say, well, again, they use a lot of Clydesdale fallacies. I mean, the whole Harry Price and the regurgitating cheesecloth, that's essentially, he claims to have gathered a specimen of it. I don't believe him. I think it's another Clydesdale fallacy.
And of course, all mediumship, they always say they get this information from Facebook or anything like that. And so we're led to believe then that mediumship only began when Facebook began.
It goes back to the ancient world. And I mean, in fact, there's reports of soothsayers of millennia, 2,000 years ago, and things like that, and it goes back into the shamans of prehistory. So yeah, it's a perennial experience that we humans have had since we've gone in.
Right, I think we'll wrap this up now, Ben. So we're talking on January the 1st, 2024. So before we wrap up, as a conclusion, what's your things that you've got lined up for this year, and also what's your hopes for this year as far as UFO disclosure and that kind of stuff?
Well, obviously they'll release more information about the aliens, and I don't know about prediction, because you see, I predicted everything that's happened in 2023, which was essentially what I would call it the year of the UFO almost. It's the most exciting ufological year in history. It's almost like the whole 2017 phenomenon coming home to roost, in a sense. But so I wouldn't like to make a prediction. I can hope what's going to happen. There'll be more of that, and we'll get closer and closer to more and more admissions. Of course, the Schumer Amendment has been essentially amended, which again it's been altered to remove some of the most important clauses to do with the presidential oversight and indeed the eminent domain, which is bad. I mean, it's bad on one level because it means that Congress now no longer has the ability that it did with the original amendment to pressure private companies into giving information and giving disclosure. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And the Schumer Amendment is amazing. It contained all these words which we never thought we'd see in official government documentation, which tends to be very, very nebulous and full of sort of vagaries. This actually uses words like non-human intelligence, extraterrestrials, technology, and things like this, or non-human technology and words like that. Well, the good thing about it is that I think the very fact that the two Mikes, as they become known, these are the Congress people who have behind this revision, who had their campaigns actually funded by these various companies. Because of what they've done, no one is now talking about there being no non-human intelligence involved. No one is now talking about it all being some great big delusion.
Yeah.
I mean, the skeptic line up till now has been, well, Congress has simply been carried away with a folly.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole David Grush thing and the other witnesses, this was just Congress losing their minds and starting to believe crazy stuff. No one's talking like that now, because if this crazy stuff didn't exist, the two Mikes would not have done what they did.
Yeah.
They wouldn't bother going to all the trouble to amend and altering an amendment for something that wasn't real.
Yeah.
Why not just let them get on with it? We got nothing to hide,
Yeah.
Let them have. You see what I mean? So I'm hoping more of that will come out this year. I'm hoping there's going to be some elections this year, so politics might hopefully. There may be some interesting development in politics. We don't know yet. There's so much unpredictable. So many things in the past I didn't predict have happened. So I'm not going to go too far out on a limb on this. On a personal level, I want to try and read more. I want to try and read more books, and because I think I've been maybe neglecting that. So I'd like to, because I've got a lot of books I haven't read yet, and I'd like to read them. I'd like to do reviews of them, possibly on a Panmo TV or a Panmo Voice. And that will be my next. That's my personal New Year's resolution. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap this up. I'd like to say to everyone, thanks for watching, and thanks for Ben for joining us. I think this is going to go on Ben's program and also the Paranormal Peep Show at some point. So we'd like to wish everyone, both of us, from Ben and I, a very happy New Year, and wish you all the best for 2024. Cheerio.
Cheerio. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, voted #1 for paranormal podcasts in the UK.